Okay, Richard Meyer, happy birthday to you, sir. The architect in white armor, as I read before, and now we can all read modernist in white armor. Indeed. Okay, this is the man, and I don't feel like saying again what I already said about what he and Peter Eisenman, his cousin, thought about possible relating to Le Corbusier, in the sense of who would have, if they would have. This is what Peter Eisenman asked at one point Richard Meyer. Richard, do you think we'll have a retrospective as complex and rich as Le Corbusier had at the Museum of Modern Art? And apparently Richard Meyer said no, Peter. And it's possible that it is as Richard Meyer said. So I guess both Peter Eisenman and Richard Meyer place themselves, a little bit at a lower level than the one at least they saw Le Corbusier belonging to. Some drawings done manually, of course, about this is the building that I mentioned, that we actually had a friend, an American engineer who worked for this building together with Richard Meyer. I'm talking about Mahadev Raman, who did make a presentation himself on this Zoom platform. So here are drawings by Richard. He drew well, I would say, rather sensitively, although his architecture, in my opinion, is, anyway, we'll arrive there. The Meyer house from 1965, white, of course, and modernistic, without compromise. This kind of modernism turns me off a little bit. I mean, what is this here? And what is this? It's, I understand you have here a circular, spiral spiral staircase. But this thing is, I don't know. I mean, to me, it's a little facile, a little aesthetical game, with, it's not very serious architecture, in my opinion, what I see here. But, he received the Pritzker Prize. Yes, he placed a sculpture there because he had to place something there. Otherwise, would have been very, awkward. Interesting, the choice of the sculpture. No, it's a sculpture that shows terror, inner terror, and John Haydock said something about excessive whiteness, that excessive whiteness is not necessarily a sign of harmony or peace or Apollonian order. It could hide terrors. And he mentioned the film, the movie The Shining with Jack Nicholson, where whiteness is indeed hiding monsters. And if you want, I wrote an essay, a short essay about Richard Meyer many years ago, after I attended a conference by him at Columbia University in New York, and I commented around this excessive whiteness. And I see this sculpture, and I'm sure he had something to do with choosing this sculpture. Shows, I would say, terror. So that whiteness, it might be indeed hiding monsters. Smith's house from 1965 to 1967. What can I say? It's modernism, assumed, and modernism displayed, and it's not a bad building, but look at those large pieces of glass there, one piece, it's this belief in I would call it graphic modernity, without being shadowed by any of the other side of himself, actually, those feelings of terror, which we saw in that sculpture. And we will see in his own sculptures at the end of this presentation. Yeah, it's probably a pleasant house to live in, but I'm still bothered by these huge pieces of glass. These huge pieces of glass to me don't show a very profound spirit or a very modest spirit vis-a-vis nature, vis-a-vis, the sky, even vis-a-vis light, vis-a-vis, if I am to push further, God himself. Is a too easy solution, so to speak, to the problem, how am I to relate to the outside? And you just put a huge piece of glass there and you think you related with the outside. I don't think it is like this. It's demagogical, it's rhetorical, it's too simplistic. You rely on the surfaces of, I mean, there is a certain level of fragmentation here in the articulation of the opaque surfaces. I would agree. But these large pieces of glass show me something else. And I mean, how tall this is, it should be, it's, maybe 6 meters. I mean, and wide, I don't know, 3 meters at least. So this is a huge piece of glass, which does not belong to an institutional building with a very large volume and surfaces, but to a private house. It is, it is, in my opinion, it is rhetorical. The building, if there is color, is on the paintings, of course, Mondrian, and I don't know who did this. I don't know. I imagine it's a genuine Piet Mondrian. Well, if it is a genuine Piet Mondrian, you can imagine who lives here. That painting, again, if it is a genuine Mondrian, probably its cost was bigger than the cost of the whole house. But this modernism without shadows, this built by the architect with a white armor, is again too conveniently white and apparently optimistic. But I would be suspicious of someone who uses so much whiteness. Here is another one. One of the earliest built works by Richard Meyer, the Salzman House, completed in 1969, is one of several Meyer designed residences that exhibits his signature style, absolute whiteness, geometric composition, and the proeminence of light. With a heavy early modernist influence, the Salzman House captures the purity of form and space seen in the projects of Le Corbusier. Le Corbusier used whiteness too, and Le Corbusier also was a proponent apparently of eugenics. And I think there is a problem with that. Again, talking about the dark side of a personality of a human, the human psyche, I think both Le Corbusier, at least at that stage in his work and life, was not expressing the complexities of his own soul, and I think Richard Meyer didn't either. But Richard Meyer never changed, while Le Corbusier did. Anyway, situated on a flat 3-acre East Hampton property near the tip of Long Island, the house consists of a primary 3-story structure and a jointed guest house. Meyer explains that from a distance, the cubic composition appears to flatten into a 2-dimensional shape against the background of land and sky. Here it is. Well, the same story, you know, white building with a certain level of fragmentations. And there is a skill here. We do have to acknowledge, as it was in the previous building. There is skill, but I don't know. I mean, it's an architecture for the privileged. You know, who builds in East Hampton? It happens that I know East Hampton because I lived there for 2 years, which was in itself a privilege. I was hired by an experimental school to be a so-called artist in residence there. And I used to take the bus in the morning from where I lived to the school, and I would hear stories of, you know, modest people, humble people who worked, who work for the very rich. And I thought of making a film, you know, where the movie would start by exactly being in a bus and hear people talking. And then in the evening, when I came back home also with the bus, hear the stories again of the same people, what they did during the day. It was the other East Hampton, the East Hampton of so-called normal people working for the so-called abnormal people, in the sense that abnormally rich, because East Hampton is indeed, you know, a very, very, very privileged place. For example, the person who hired me, who lived in East Hampton, her neighbors across the street, right across the street from her, were Steven Spielberg, and Calvin Klein. So you can imagine. Anyway, this is a house built by Richard Meyer in East Hampton. And yes, it is a, you know, so-called nice house, opulent. Look at the space here in the living room, in the living areas. And what can you say? You know, you can afford to build in East Hampton anything. If you can afford to build in East Hampton, you are rich. But if you are building a building like this, again, I mentioned the large glass surface. In my opinion, an architect who does this kind of you know, huge dimensions, uses this just one single piece of glass of these dimensions. I know I would say something outrageous now and maybe unacceptable, but in my opinion, someone who uses such a piece of glass, especially in a private residence, is not a very sensitive person. Because to be sensitive, probably Frank Lloyd Wright was right in this case and not wrong. You know, those who work for Frank Lloyd Wright used to call him sometimes Frank Lloyd wrong. But in this case, I think he was right. He said the windows are the biggest problem in architecture. The architecture, he said, approximately in these words, is not difficult. It's not difficult to do architecture if there were no windows to make, but you do have to make windows. And once you make them, that window or those windows do say something about, even about your character as a human being, not only as an architect. In my opinion, this demagogical, rhetorical window says something about Richard Meyer, which in my opinion is not very, you know, flattering, because it's a mimicked openness. It's a mimic. Let's not delude ourselves. You know, this window doesn't open. So yes, it offers transparency, but essentially it's a shield between the inside and the outside. It's, yeah, visually you connect with the outside, but only visually. If here there was a small window that opened, you know, a tiny little, you know, maybe square window, that would have been already a small gesture of connecting with the outside on another plane in a different way, but it is not. It's so this, for example, Stephen Hall. Stephen Hall is more subtle as an architect. Stephen Hall would have never left this huge surface. You know, he uses glass too, but he divides it, he fragments it, and that says something. In my opinion, it says a lot. Yes, it's well, you know, composed. You know, he is talented, Richard Meyer. If by talent means we mean having the ability, almost the, you know, if you have a virtuoso, you can create buildings that are pleasant, but you know, I recall what Louis Kahn said about Le Corbusier, that somehow, well, you know, who was Kahn to comment like this? But he acknowledged the beauty of the works, although I don't think the buildings of Le Corbusier are necessarily so-called beautiful. But Louis Kahn thought that, you know, there is beauty, but that beauty doesn't say anything about the character of his architecture, and implicitly the character of the man, meaning Le Corbusier. Maybe these buildings by Richard Meyer do the same thing. You know, what is the character of the man who built it? We see two sides. You know, this side of the building, this elevation, is different from this one. Anyway, this is a building for financial gods, probably. I mean, people who gathered a good number of millions so they can afford such an architect, and they can afford. Look at the plot of land. There is a lot of land here, and as I said, East Hampton is extremely expensive. I was fortunate not having to pay a rent. So it was paid by the school I worked for. Otherwise, I could have never afforded to live even for a day in East Hampton, forget about 2 years. Anyway, then look at the house. But in a way, you know, when Wolf Prick said, don't think only about architecture, because if you think only about architecture, you only get architecture. And here I see almost a preoccupation only with architecture. This is just about architecture. I don't see anything else besides architecture. And yes, again, it is skillfully done, but I also know, I mean, this is, so to speak, my own problem, that I know in certain schools of architecture, the bathrooms, the toilets, and so on are not accepted in the elevation of the building. Certainly not in the you know, important elevation. Well, look here. They are in the elevation, and indeed in an so-called important elevation of the building. They are not hidden, they are not on the side, they are there. Anyway, they have to be somewhere, of course. Yeah, a building for the human gods. White, of course, it has to be white, because we are afraid of Dionysus, the god of intoxication. And we are promoters of cleanness, whiteness, so-called order, and then everything is fine. We feel fine about ourselves because everything is white and splendid and beautiful and in East Hampton. And being so, who could contest anything? Now, an artist community in New York City. This is a less known work by Richard Meyer. Now he fragmented the windows, and I like these windows more. But I think, I don't know if I'm correct, I think he only did some work for an existing building. I think I might be wrong. I don't know. But anyway, we are not any longer in East Hampton. We are in New York, where it's also very expensive to build, and the poor artists usually don't have money. Even here, I imagine only some privileged artists afford it to live. It's okay, I guess. I mean, you know, the distance between this facade and this one is not very big. And you have these big windows, well, fragmented, but still big, facing each other is, yeah, again, a little bit rhetorical, because these windows do not face the sky and the land and the ocean as the house in East Hampton. They face each other. And these also do not expect to receive sunlight at the bottom of the building in this narrow courtyard. Well, you know, there is no justice in the world, of course. So there is no justice here either. Those at the top see the sky, those at the bottom barely, if they lower themselves on their backs on the floor, maybe. Now, the condominium of the Olivetti Training Center in Tarrytown, New York, 1971. It's a project. I don't know if he built it. Again, Richard Meyer. Richard Meyer is not. Richard Meyer is very predictable, actually. Indeed, he is a signature architect. And I have to tell you, when I was attending the conferences in Avery Hall at Columbia in New York, he was not very well regarded. In fact, people preferred his cousin, Peter Eisenman, and they were all a little bit kind of making fun of Richard Meyer because of the predictability of his work. It is a signature work. You know, once you learn his stylistic, you know, I almost said gimmicks, then you say this is a building by Richard Meyer, and you might not be wrong. But he was and is a skillful architect, you know, and he is able to build both for the private and the public. This would be, I mean, it was meant to be a public building. And, you know, I think he handles the matters properly, but predictably. There are no big surprises. Here I would see somehow an influence coming from Alvar Aalto at MIT, his dormitory at MIT, which is a beautiful, remarkable building. You know, anyway, it's maybe not so important that influence is transparent. Douglas House in Harbor Spring, Michigan, 1973. Again, wideness and light and beauty. To use the words of Charles Baudelaire, I would say luxe, calme, et volupté. Luxury, calmness, and voluptuousness. And the happy owners, perhaps here, gloriously enjoying the, you know, ephemeral life here on earth in the white splendor, in the green that Richard Meyer built for them. And of course, there is even access to the, you know, to the ocean. So what can we say? I don't know if it's the ocean here, if it's in Michigan. Let me see where it is. No, it's not the ocean, but it is splendid. I mean, what can we say? My God, you know, who said that life is difficult? Well, not for these people living here. I am also thinking of the house that Zaha Hadid, the only private house that Zaha Hadid built for that immodest Russian tycoon, also in the woods, and also the building emerging above here is a little better, I would say, because, you know, the building is not really arrogantly emerging from nature, from the earth at alarming heights, but it's still asserting man in distinctive, if not distinguished ways. And look at these people, they are even young, you know. I don't know, they are not a little bit sad or saddened by the splendor of the house that Richard Meyer built for them. If I had this house built for me, I would be sad to live here, knowing that so many people in this world cannot afford to live like this. But I guess this would have been my own problem. Now, try to imagine someone sitting on this chair. His eyes or her eyes would be almost, well, not bad, almost at the level of this horizontal thing here, blocking the view. Now, all of a sudden, Richard Meyer divided a piece of glass, but I think in a very uninspired way. Or did he do it intentionally as some kind of a metaphor for the Damocles sword that is at any time, threatening our well-being? He could have done this at any height, a little bit higher, or in my opinion, even if, yes, when you sit here, your head would be somewhere here, but I don't think he chose the correct height for this horizontal thing here, which is almost blocking the, indeed, a magnificent view. I have to look again on the map, because it does look like the ocean, but I didn't know that Michigan, no, in Michigan there is no ocean. What kind? It must be a huge lake. And I should be ashamed that I do not know. And I am ashamed. Anyway, or maybe it's not in Michigan. That could be possible too, that I described wrongly, but I don't think so. The building. Anyway, light, whiteness, splendor in the grass. Well, it's more than the grass, it's the forest. Now look at the base of the building. In order for Richard Meyer to offer the house to this happy-go-lucky two young people, he had to build this base, this pedestal, which is huge. He could have built easily another house here. This is just to elevate, this part of the house at a certain level. To me, problematic. I hope I have a section here through the building. In my opinion, he chose wrongly. I would not have done the pedestal white. If this pedestal was made with stone or another material, or at least another color, it would have been better. But because I don't know if you know, Brâncuș, when he also sculpted pedestals for his sculptures, and the pedestal for him was important and difficult to do, because it had to have a little bit of an artistic quality, but not to compete, not to the extent that it competed with the sculpture. Something like a transitional piece between, let's say, the earth and the sky. And here, yes, he could have done this, but the fact that he did it so white and so, bluntly so somehow, I feel that Richard Meyer doesn't show a correct understanding of the relationship between the below and the above. The below being the earth and the above being the sky. Anyway, and look at it, it's massive. And I wonder, nothing happens in this volume, nothing, it's just huge, because it is huge, it's almost doubling the volume of the house. It's not done gracefully, this base is not done, it's a huge white box on which sits the house. Yeah. Anyway, the Bronx Developmental Center in New York, 1976. I guess it works. It's fine. It's it's a community developmental center. I don't know exactly what they do there. In what way? It's about so-called development, but of course his signature little rounded details, yeah, modernism. Not too many surprises, but it's a big complex, as you can see. People are developing on a mega scale there. I still wonder in what way does this development takes place. The Athenaeum, New Harmony, Indiana, 1979. Another, I would say, immodest building by Richard Meyer. Another splendor in the grass. Another huge building, which could have been very well an institutional building, but it's you know, I'm sarcastic now, modest. No, I just said it is a modest building for a lucky one. And look at again at the largeness of the plot of land. I mean, we are dealing here with gods, really, gods on earth. I mean, there is here some, you know, approximation of some kind of a trouble, if I am to call it so, a visceralization of the house, which shows that Richard Meyer not always was hiding, you know, a so-called certain darkness within. But when you look at the pictures, gone are the grayish shades in the drawing. It's all again white and splendid, and you know, and this reference to Villa Savoie. And now this is, to me, this is not great architecture, but and this is, you know, really facile, you know, this, you know, why this way and not the other way. And it's graphic. It's a graphic architecture, rather conveniently done. Otherwise, yes, it's probably it's probably not a bad building to live in if you can pay for the air conditioning and the heating and the cooling and all the rest, because it's a white citadel of appreciable dimensions. Now, actually, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is not a private building. Let's read again. Is this a house? No, it's not. And I realized it's not when I saw the toilets. The toilets say a lot about the building. No private house has, you know, this row of toilets. So I guess, I don't know what it is. It's probably some kind of a museum. Yeah, let's look again at the plan. Yeah, it's clear. It's even an auditorium here. But you see, the simple fact that it's easy to confuse a private villa or a private house from a public building, this itself in itself is problematic a little bit. Although the relationship between the private and the public is a complex one, and sometimes, you know, as Palladio himself said, you know, the city is a big villa and the villa is a small city. So this is the good part of the building, but I still think there should be some differentiation between a private building and the public building. This one, if it was maybe a little, just a little bit smaller, it could have been a private house. Maybe even like this. In fact, he built private houses which are not significantly smaller than this building. Now, a seminary in Hartford, Connecticut, 1981, whiteness, whiteness, and whiteness again. The skill is obvious, it's here, it exists. He does have skill as an architect. But in my opinion, that maybe I'm wrong in my opinion. Somehow I dislike the word style. I think a great architect is beyond a certain style. In his architecture, he is a signature architect. And thus predictable. But there is skill. Obviously, on both sides of the building, there is skill. Please remember, I don't have to tell you this because you know his architecture, but you'll be surprised if you don't know his sculptures. When we arrive at the sculptures, you realize what a distance between his architecture and his sculptures. I like the way this tree emerges from almost within the building. And yeah, no, he's not an architect to ignore. But let's see, the High Museum of Art in Atlanta, Georgia, 1983, whiteness again. I don't know, he didn't get tired of this whiteness, you know. I think here a graffiti artist would be very welcome. Just as that the very same graffiti artist would be very welcomed at Villa Savoie. That he was influenced by Le Corbusier is obvious. But Le Corbusier didn't become a signature architect, actually. But Richard Meyer did. Renoir, well, yes, Renoir would be indeed very, very welcomed, and so is Rodin here. You know, somehow the building is not saying what the sculpture, the sculpture by Rodin is saying. You know, look at the position of this human being, you know, and the building has a triumphalism, a white triumphalism, which ignores actually the very meaning of the sculpture by the great Auguste Rodin in its proximity. I wonder why architects sometimes, well, artists could be as well, rather ignorant. And truly, I have myself an irresistible urge to splash some color on these, you know, almost squares, white squares. They are actually unbearable in the insolent whiteness. Maybe they were meant to, and I imagine he built them like this in order to suspend art there and to display art. Otherwise, again, he is able to create a certain visceralization of the project, of the building. And this is good, I think. But not everything, look, now, yes, art arrives, and yes, it is welcome. Siemens Forum, München, 1983. Another Richard Meyer building, of course. Yeah, serving capitalism in a white mode. Now, this purity, because whiteness is associated with purity, is it a purity you aspire towards, or is it a purity that exists and only needs to be acknowledged? What is it? It's a desiderata. It's an ideal that one has to long for, or it is a reality that doesn't need to be aspired towards because it is. Louis Kahn asked himself, what is order? And he said, order is. Well, paraphrasing, perhaps we can ask, what is whiteness? And then, paraphrasing Louis Kahn, we could say whiteness is. But is it? Another art center in Iowa, 1984, another Richard Meyer building, although here he has some grayness, maybe to connect to the clouds. So the clouds pass. This one is a little bit less graceful, but thankfully we have this sculpture by a very important Swedish sculptor who also created beautiful sculptures for the Cranbrook Academy. Yeah, at times I can't watch too much Richard Meyer architecture because it's too predictable. It's just too much whiteness, I'm surprised he didn't get tired of it. He didn't. I think even now he builds in a similar way, with yeah, here is not just whiteness, as I said, there is grayness too, and of course, so conveniently here it's at a lower level grayness, and then at the top and in between is the whiteness. Sure. Now another museum in Frankfurt in Germany, 1985, of course, whiteness, but at least here we don't see those huge one-piece glasses that he used in his early work, and this I think is a good thing. But I don't see many other things that are good besides that, and the drawings show some hesitation somehow, and these hesitations I would have liked to see in the work, in the built work too, and I don't see it. I don't see them. Before the pandemic. Now the Grota House, New Jersey, 1989. Look at this. Why is it that you are not surprised? Well, you are not surprised because it's not surprising. Once you saw a building by Richard Meyer, you saw all of them. A little bit of grayness. He wouldn't go away from whiteness too far away, that's obvious. Now, as you know, Richard Meyer was one of the New York Five, or the New York Whites, the other four being John Haydock, Peter Eiserman, Charles Withme, and Michael Graves. Michael Graves unfortunately succumbed to the pleasantries of the vicious pleasantries of postmodernism, and I think that was a tragic event. Fortunately, the other four stayed away from being caressed to death by postmodernism. Here we see a little bit of grayness, which is, I think, a good thing, but still, too conveniently, you have whiteness and then you have a little bit of grayness. No, some courage, monsieur, some courage. You needed some courage. Bring in some, bricks, stones. You are afraid, of course, because they are earth and they are humid. Well, not necessarily, the stones are not humid, but it's dangerous when you bring in the elements of of nature. It's difficult. You bring in the earth, you bring the dirt in, and that dirt could say something that you hide within yourself. Is dangerous. Better do it all white. I mean, yes, the seating, I don't know if he chose those pieces of furniture. They are, black, but I don't know. There is something about that blackness which irritates me. In contrast with the splendid whiteness, they are too brutally divorced from that whiteness, in my opinion. Although they might be very comfortable, but again, this is a house for human gods. Now the Daimler-Benz Forschungszentrum, anyway, Daimler-Benz, Mercedes-Benz, of course. And yes, thankfully we have the red sculpture, which is testifying about something that Richard Meyer is not willing even to whisper. And everything is fine. As long as we have art to tell us something beyond the lies of the white architecture, it's okay. And yes, the architecture is lying, in my opinion. Is lying because that's not how life is, all white and all splendid and all, so-called ordered and civilized and so on. And then, of course, we bring in the sculpture to tell us what the building is not telling us. Look at this. It's clear. The scream of the artist. Well, it's in an abstractive, maybe a decorative scream, if I can express myself oxymoronically. But the sculpture, again, tries to say something which the building does not. And that's it. Germany, again, 1992. Welcome to a Richard Meyer building. It's a déjà vu, monsieur. It's a déjà vu. We saw it all. We know your architecture. Now the computer steps in. This is a more recent, although this was maybe done, let's see, what is the year, 1992. Almost there. The computer existed, but I don't know. Anyway. I'm very increasingly impatient and suspicious of this excessive whiteness. The rhetorics of this kind of architecture are obvious. Now the Stadthaus in Ulm, also Germany, 1994, white again. Look at the buildings around, they are different. This is white, almost, I don't know how to say, almost inappropriately white, but it's white, of course, because that's the signature of his architecture. I would call it the Savoy syndrome. This man studied Villa Savoy by Le Corbusier and never moved away from it. It's all literally, it's all at bottom Villa Savoy in various configurations. And even Le Corbusier moved away from Villa Savoy. How come that Richard Meyer didn't? The follower. There are variations, yes, all affected by what I call the Savoy syndrome. He probably never saw or never considered seriously the much more revolutionary building that Le Corbusier built, and that is the Lille Le Cabanon. Because maybe if he did, he would have changed his, he would have smashed his so-called signature. But he didn't. And of course, the dimensions of Le Cabanon would be, alarming to say the least for someone like Richard Meyer. You mean to live within 16 square meters? Well, here maybe even the toilet is larger. Barcelona Museum of Contemporary Art, 1995. Welcome to Richard Meyer. Whiteness again, and his, predictable assortment of, accidental architectures emerging from the large block, predictable themselves, and rather graphic, if I can say so. Done with skill. I acknowledge there is skill here. And again, I'm happy that he fragments the glass. This is a good thing. It's a sign of wisdom. But there aren't many surprises. I'm sure it functions very well. It's a architectonic mechanism which accommodates art. Maybe well, maybe properly. Now, a city hall and central library in The Hague, the Netherlands, 1995. Welcome to Richard Meyer again. Who would say that this is not a Richard Meyer building? It would be hard to say. What do we see here? The columns of Villa Savoie. And then a white splendor, not in the grass, but in the city above. That's it. Who said that architecture is difficult? It's not. Well, this was done when it was the celebration of 100 years of the Stiel, and the Dutch, created these things on these white buildings, but these are just temporary. I think temporary. Anyway, these were not done by Richard Meyer. They were done by the city, in paying homage to the Stiel and to Mondrian. And still, but this has nothing to do with Richard Meyer. Anyway, Rachowski House, Dallas, Texas, 1996. I like this house. It's true. But again, it's Villa Savoie. Little thin round columns at the bottom, and then yes, very skillfully designed this facade. I like it. This was built for a very rich man who made, actually this house now is a museum, and in Texas, the land of racial discriminations, and oil, or should I say mention first the oil. This is the man. This is the owner of the house. Look at his coat, at his jacket. Not bad, rather extravagant. This is a man who made a fortune, of course, with financial speculations, and being a capable man, he understood that money is just a means. So he invested heavily in art. And for this, extremely rich man, Richard Meyer built that house. I think at that time, if I remember the story, he was a bachelor and he built it for himself, but also has a space, for his art collection, a large art collection. And then he got married and his wife didn't like living there. So they built another house, another architect built it, not Richard Meyer. And this house was made a museum or a foundation. This is the man. I'm sure these financial speculators, dandy or not, and he does seem to be a dandy, are capable men. They made their money with skill in the field of financial transactions. They also understand that money by itself is nothing, so they value art. And this is the work, a good work, actually. This is one of the best buildings, in my opinion, by Richard Meyer. And beautiful artwork. I forgot who is the artist who did, Walter de Maria, probably. I'm not sure. But this is also very subtle. I mean, we are dealing here with serious art. And in this case, I would say also serious architecture. If it was not, still somehow the tiring reference to Villa Savoie, would have been better. But all in all, it's an elegant building, elegant art, although the role of art is not necessarily to be elegant. But all in all, it works very well. The land art and with the building and everything shows here taste. taste and money. And I like this shield, you know, even if it doesn't have color on it, somehow it's well proportioned, and in a way it is like a knight's armor, you know. It's the shield that separates art from, you know, daily life, if I am to speculate a little bit about its meaning. And this is the rear elevation of the building. Yes, everything is splendid. There is money there, there is richness, there is art, there is taste. Yeah. But again, ominously, blackness shows its head, so to speak, in the white interior. You know, why was there a need for this blackness here and this blackness here? I don't know if you know, but in alchemy, European alchemy, there are 3 stages in the alchemical process. The first one is nigredo, the blackening. Then is albedo, the whitening. So in the process of aspiring towards discovering the, you know, to transform the raw matter into gold, you need to go through these phases. First blackness, not whiteness, blackness, then whiteness or albedo, and then in the end, you arrive at rubedo, which is reddening. Well, Richard Meyer never attempted even to arrive at the third stage, which is rubedo or reddening. I'm talking not necessarily chromatically, but metaphorically, to assume the, you know, the blood of life. He didn't. Also, he didn't start with nigredo. Maybe that's why he arrived at the successive whiteness, because he started with it. And only occasionally there are, you know, small black interventions which might even belong not to him but to the client. I don't know. I mean, the artwork, I don't think Richard Meyer had anything to do with the choice of the artwork. So I would consider with seriousness the stages in the alchemical process: blackness, whiteness, redness, and is excessively concerned with the second stage, whiteness. And that's why he didn't arrive, in my opinion, to a truly significant creation. But at the level of whiteness, yes, he is good. It's just that this whiteness is tiring at one moment. And you see even here some black silhouettes, sculptures, artworks brought in by who else? The client. Because the client probably understood something that Richard Meyer didn't. You can't have just whiteness. Even the floor here is almost black, or, you know. I mean, yeah, there is a little bit of red little artwork here again, which is the acquisition of the client, not the, you know, the work of you know, Richard Meyer. Actually, even his sculptures stay away from color. They are black and contorted. So I think if I am to express myself symbolically somehow, or metaphorically, or I don't know how to put it, I think in the psychological sense that alchemy searched to transform raw psychic material into not vulgar gold, because I read this in Carl Jung, that the true alchemist, and I don't know Latin, and I'm sorry I don't know Latin, but I know the translation of this phrase, and the only is maybe the only, not one of the few things I might know in Latin: aurum nostrum non est aurum vulgi, which means our gold is not the vulgar one. This is what Carl Jung thought, that the true alchemist, for the true alchemist, it was not the gold of money or the so-called real gold that mattered.
but the psychological gold, to arrive at lapis, at the philosophical stone. It was about knowledge. It was about arriving at wholeness, spiritually, psychologically. And I don't think Richard Meyer went so far. That's why you see, in some of his works, you have a lot of whiteness, and then you have islands of blackness. But that redness, which is the culmination of the alchemical process, he never assumed, and he never arrived at. Robert Irwin. Sorry, it wasn't Walter de Maria. This was the sculptor who did this work, and I think it's very nice. It's subtle, it's sophisticated, and I think it works well with that beautifully manicured, plot of land covered with grass. Itself very stylishly, treated. Without doubt, the client is a sophisticated one. Lucio Fontana. Now I show us a few artworks from within the building, because now it is like a little museum. And I read that it's a good building because it has this, intimate atmosphere, because initially it was to be a private house for that single man. And then, so it's a good feeling to visit a museum which does not have a crushingly institutional atmosphere, but a rather intimate one. So I'll show a few artworks from within the building. Lucio Fontana, well-known name in art, The End of God. Interesting, the title and maybe even the work in a way. The End of God. Then we go now. Well, I guess I only show those two works, the land art and this one by Lucio Fontana. Now, a house in Naples, Florida, and this house actually had as its HVAC engineer our former friend. He didn't show up at our meetings for a long time. I'm going to write to him and ask him why. Mahadev Raman, an interesting engineer in the United States, very accomplished. He was the president of OVARUP America for many years, even of the Architectural League in New York. And he worked on this house, and he said something about, I forgot what he said, why Richard Meyer arrived at this rather extravagant for him roofing for this house. I will ask him. Now I don't remember. But there is some kind of a rhetorical exuberance here. It's not real expressionism. It's graphic. It's rhetorical. It's white. It's white, and exuberance, in my opinion, cannot be white. Exuberance has to do exactly with that redness that I mentioned, rubedo, the last stage of the alchemical process. A white exuberance is almost a contradiction in terms. It's mimic, it's not real exuberance. Real exuberance has to be warm, has to be red, I mean, metaphorically. And here, anyway, Center for Media, the Museum of Television and Radio, Beverly Hills, 1996. Welcome to Richard Meyer. No surprise. More surprise at night, because this becomes greenish, I don't know how, and then, you don't see the whiteness any longer, which is a good thing. But during the day, and also the interior, white, white, and white again. Albedo. Now we arrive at the well-known Getty Center in Los Angeles, 1997, a large complex of buildings. There is skill here, but somehow in all his works, I see the paradigm, Villa Savoye. I mean, look here, this is almost literally Villa Savoye, the facade of this building with the columns. This man never got rid of this. You know, all his life, you know, Villa Savoye determined everything he did. In my opinion, Villa Savoye is overestimated. You know, I don't think it's a great building. It's dogmatic, it's rigid, and no wonder it's not inhabited. It's just, and look at the influence. I mean, Richard Meyer without Villa Savoye is inconceivable. If there was no Villa Savoye, we would not have had Richard Meyer. Yes, there are some good things here, you know, these, you know, buildings. There is a certain level of visceralization, but I still think he didn't assume that rubedo, the last stage of the alchemical process. He remained stuck at the second level, you know, albedo, whitening. Now, fortunately, here we have these big rocks, which say something about what he didn't say anything. That's good. And here he also experimented, but kind of late in his life, with a different texture at least. And I'm glad he did, but still a little bit timidly, and you know, too much color coordination, you know, and these stones are, you can tell, they are decorative, you know, they are just attached to a building that was not, this is not structural, a structural stone. So it's probably just thin, you know, plates of stone, you know, attached to the building. So they are not convincing. The interior, the unavoidable, sorry about the, you know, the resolution of the building, the unavoidable Richard Meyer. It's a small town here in a way, you know, destined for culture, for art, for of course far away from the real city, a kind of an acropolis. It's not bad, but it could have been better if he got rid of the Villa Savoye within himself, which he never did, and I think he never will. In Singapore, 1998, even in his towers, he's still, you know, the man of Villa Savoye. This is a vertical Villa Savoye in a way. Where is it? In Singapore, of course, the Switzerland of Southeast Asia. A round tower, okay. It could have been like this, it could have been in many other ways. White Plaza, why are we not surprised? It has to be white. It's by Richard Meyer in Basel, 1998. Well, here I don't have a picture, sorry, but now we go to his sculptures. We have seen enough white buildings. I don't think we need other examples, because we know already what a Richard Meyer building looks like. But now, surprise, surprise, his sculptures, because he also does sculpture. And look at that. Something, you know, a little decorative remains, is still him. But I wish something of his sculptures he would have been, I wish he was able to bring into his buildings something of his sculptures. Look at this. This is a contorted soul. This is this somehow connects with that if you remember that head, the sculpted head, probably from Mesoamerica, from an old time, where you saw terror in those eyes. Here we see terror also. It's the terror which he doesn't communicate in his buildings, but in his sculptures, I think he does. Even here, even a certain aggressivity. You see here, what is this? This is a machinery, an artistic monster in a way, and I was just talking before I began the presentation with Natalia about, the sexual allegations of harassment that Richard Meyer was, accused of. I see aggressivity here. It's a voracious big mouth somehow with many teeth, willing to, to bite you. That's what I see. I see aggressiveness. Is the aggressiveness of someone who was all his life restrained by the excessive whiteness that he used. And now in his sculpture, he's externalizing some of his demons in a way. Here is a view of the exhibition he had with his sculptures. And aren't his sculptures, in a way, the other side of the same story? I mean, if it is a coin, on one side is his architecture and on the other side is his sculpture. His sculpture is metaphorically or conceptually black. It has to do with nigredo. His architecture has to do with albedo, but in both there is no reddening. Even here he is rather graphic. This sculpture, this statue, or how could I call it? It's conveniently designed, balancing certain parts. It is, in my opinion, a little bit graphic. But look at this. If you saw this and you didn't know it was by Richard Meyer, would you have thought that it is by Richard Meyer? I don't think I would have. No, I would not have expected it. How come the Apollonian architect, those white, splendid surfaces and volumes with beautiful light all over? And what's going on here? Where is the light? Where is the whiteness? Where is that luxe calme volupté? They are gone. We see a rather tortured soul here. That's what I see. And if he would have expressed this in his buildings, I think his architecture would have gained something, because I don't see Villa Savoy here. Now, of course, this is a sculpture. It's not a building. Although something relates, because even here you don't see color. You don't see a terror transgressed. You don't see a viscerality that was defeated or ordered. It's not. But they are interesting, these useless machineries. Obviously, Richard Meyer had and has skill, both as an architect and as an artist. But conceptually speaking, as I said, and I repeat myself and I apologize, he didn't aspire towards the highest level of accomplishment, at least, I shouldn't say at least. Well, at the level of his own personal growth and at the level of his art. He remained at the levels of albedo, whitening, and nigredo, blackening. He didn't assume the last stage, rubedo, reddening. And here is a picture with the 5, well, here there are only 4. Let's see who is missing. Peter Eisenman is on the right. On the front is Richard Meyer. On the left, Michael Graves. And in the back, Charles Quidme. The one who is missing is John Haydock. Funnily, here it says the New York 5, but there are only 4. Anyway, back to his sculptures. I mean, I know it might sound a little bit problematic, but I think his sculptures assume what I might call ugliness, something that his architecture doesn't. And you know, it's in a way it's you know, to be expected. You know, your architecture is about beauty, so to speak, and then another side of you is attempting to express what the buildings do not express, and that is ugliness, if I am to call it so. I shouldn't use such words really, because this is not serious art criticism. But a layperson, a common person, if you know, if such a person would see this artwork, would say it's ugly, probably. Why? Because, you know, it would be hard to describe it with such words as splendid or beautiful. No. So he was and is kind of an interesting case in the quest for to use, I don't know why I keep making references to alchemy, and I'm not really an expert. I just read Psychology and Alchemy by Carl Jung, and that's where I learned about these three phases: blackening, nigredo, whitening, albedo, and reddening, rubedo. I think if you would have pushed further to somehow connect the spirit of his art with the spirit of his architecture, maybe he would have been able to arrive at that desired last stage, rubedo, maybe. But he didn't. And this is because they are separated. You know, this is one world, the world of his sculptures, and then the world of his architecture is another world. But what I said is probably not quite convincingly said, because in both is him. I mean, they are related. The whiteness of his buildings and the approximate blackness or dark grayness. And I'm not only talking chromatically, but the meaning of the work is rather, you know, almost ominous. It's dark. Is almost black. But it's the same man. It's the same man. So there is some kind of a signature artist in his in these creations, artistic creations too. Now, of course, there is a signature artist in the paintings of Piet Mondrian, but Mondrian, I think, went further than Richard Meier. In my opinion, as an artist, now I cannot necessarily compare, no, but I should. I could compare an artist with an architect artist. I think Mondrian went further. In my opinion, in painting, Mondrian is a higher artist than Richard Meier is. I know I shouldn't make hierarchies, but I think Mondrian went further, and Richard Meier is an important architect of our time, but not one of the most important, in my opinion. That's it. So let me stop the share and the recording. Okay, Francisco Xavier Sáenz de Oiza, a Spanish architect. I think he was born today, or he died today. That is October 12th. A very interesting Spanish architect. Here he is, first with just his hand and the part of his face. Here he is, an intense and serious man, and with an interesting body of work, the Oiza. Some drawings by him. This is a tower he built. You know, maybe a little bit, I call it a little bit decorative in plan, but still I understood when it was built was, you know, stirred up things in Spain. Eric Miralles, I attended a conference by Eric Miralles in New York, and he said that in Spain, they don't have verticals, they don't have towers. That usually the Spanish architecture is horizontal. Well, he made this statement in the 90s. So in the 20th century, since then, things changed. There are towers now being built in Spain, in Catalonia and in Madrid, and some of those towers, is true, built by foreigners. But this was built by a Spaniard. And we are going to see, these are just drawings, but we are going to see the tower that he actually built. And it's possible that what Miralles said was correct, that Spaniards, at least until his time, the time when I attended the conference, didn't build too many tall buildings. I engaged him in a discussion. I said, what about Sagrada Familia, which has, you know, at least tall parts? And he said, yes, but it's an exception. And I guess it's still an exception. In the meantime, of course, Jean Nouvel, Toyo Ito built towers and others just in Barcelona. Now, Santuario de Nuestra Señora de Aranzazu, I am sure I don't pronounce well, 1950, 1954. So this is an architecture from almost 70 years ago. 70 years ago, I like this building, I confess. And truly, after Richard Meyer, it's a fresh air here. You know, it's tectonics, it's history, it's the heaviness of the stone, it's the sophistication of what he did here. You know, I don't know very well about this emphatic thin cross at the top, but otherwise it's look at it. You know, I mean, really, goodbye, Richard Meyer. I'm tired of you. Here is something, you know, European, but it's not only European. It has a freshness, a vision, although it is about a building connected with an existing building. He didn't build everything here, but he transformed. So it's a process of continuation and change. And I don't know. I mean, I do know. This is, I like what I see here. This is really, this is not just graphic work and, you know, all that excessive whiteness. And no, it's look at the nature and look at the new building. Yes, I don't know if he did this as well. He might have. So he was able to operate in this I don't like so much, although it has a nice articulation of volumes. I like this. I like this building very much by the Oiza. And even the interior, you know, it's dramatic. It's not flamboyantly dramatic, but it is dramatic. And look at these stones. You know, they are crafted in a certain way which might evoke, you know, that crown at the top of on the head of Jesus in a certain way. There is a you know, something here that refers to a certain tragedy and a certain you know, aggressivity which took place against of course Christ. And then the sculptures, the statues that adorn the facade are also, you know, evoking a history, the history of art, the history of faith, and even the history, if I am to call it so, the biography of the stone. It's an architecture which is, in a way, could belong to what was called critical regionalism. It's modern, but also it connects somehow with the architecture of the place. It's not you know, a white manifesto, splendor in the grass. No, it belongs to this earth. It belongs to this town. It belongs to this religious institution here, and it's done with not with you know, false expectations, or with it's this building, in my opinion, the way he treated this facade shows a very engaged relationship with what faith is and what a church is. I wish you know, some church figures from our country would see some such works, because it's truly a shame, and I repeat, it's a shame that the church in our country doesn't understand that you cannot honor God without being creative. It's actually an insult to God, because if the human being is you know, made in resemblance to God, then and if God was and is creative, then man should be creative too, and we are not in the field of ecclesiastical architecture at all. Here is the architect, and here is the building. Proyecto para la nueva basílica, anyway, I can't read that. But a good work. Bravo to Oiza. I would gladly go to such a church, just for the building itself. It's a modern building, but it's also not saying no to what preceded it. Look at the artwork here, you know, again, a creation. It is a creation, thus it is alive. Thus it connects with a big creation, the creation of God. Why the church in our country doesn't understand this is beyond me. You cannot have faith and be dogmatic. No, you either have faith and you are open, or you retire in a dogma, and thus, in my opinion, and I know it's a strong statement, you betray God. You betray creation. How could you honor creation with a non-creation? It's not possible. But the church thinks it's possible. They think that that's the way you honor God, through dogma. It's ridiculous. Maybe the theologians, the church figures, if they would be aware of buildings built for this function in other parts, maybe they would become more flexible. But they also don't want to learn. So there. Look here, you know, everything is a creation, even this you know, strange lighting system, you know, emerging from the ceiling. And the stone, yes, is the stone. The you know, the base of the building. Modern art and stone together, you know, or concrete. Stone again, Oiza. Truly, after Richard Meyer, the heaviness of the stone is very welcome. And this is not a stone, you know, like he used, Richard Meyer, in the Getty Center. No, it's not. This is not just, you know, covering something else with thin plates of stone. This is not thin.
As you can see, I like these stones, which are worked by human hands, of course, or human machineries. But I find them, remarkable that, you have the world of nature and then you have the world of man, and this tower of this church. Again, I'm a little bit unhappy about this, cross there. It's too, in a way, almost uncreatively put there, but and Friday, I don't know. I mean, the wind is probably anchored very strongly. Otherwise, that cross would fall from there. Anyway, we arrive now at the Torres Blancas. You saw the drawings for this tower. And Blancas, I guess it's white, the white tower of Madrid, 1961, 1969. Here it is. Considered in a way a brutalist work of architecture, maybe modern in a way. This is also interesting, I mean, you saw the plan. It is a little bit graphic, but it is saved from facile graphism by the tectonics of the building, I think. I like particularly, although the functionalists might protest of what's going on here, the proximity of these windows, the darkness here is what I call the visceralization of the project. I don't know very much about the top, but all in all, it was an experiment for Madrid to have such a tower in Madrid. In my opinion, this ending is a little bit problematic. I actually like more the previous work by Oiza than this tower, but even this one has some qualities. I personally would have ended it differently than the way he did here. Still, it was a courageous work for Madrid at that time, almost 80 years ago. In my opinion, the top part does not belong to the same kind of architecture like the building below, but maybe some might think that exactly this makes it interesting. I don't know. But you see a certain relationship between the top of what's going on inside. I'm not entirely seduced by what I see here, but that's my subjectivity. So this was in Madrid, was not in Catalonia, was not in Barcelona. So maybe Miralles was thinking mainly about, I don't know. I'm sure he knew of this building. But it was probably the accident which confirmed the rule that, there were at that time not too many tall buildings like this one in Spain. So this was a kind of an exception. Here is the plan.
Okay. Yeah, I just have these works by him. I wish I had a longer presentation about this architect, but I think we have an image, you know, even if not complete, about his works. And now I go to Kisho Kurokawa, was born on the same day, and again I opened the wrong things here. Sorry, Richard Meyer. We saw Francisco de Oiza. We saw. Now we go to Kisho Kurokawa, the Japanese architect born on the same day. Let me see slideshow. This was a little bit strange. This day, my presentation started late, and I am a little bit marked by it. We begin with Kisho Kurokawa. Let's see, is it recording? It is recording, okay. So Kisho Kurokawa, 1934-2007. So he died at 73. Usually Japanese live longer lives, but he manifested himself. You know what? Okay, no, I thought of changing the language because we are just Romanians here now, but I will continue now in English since I talked until now in English. This is what he says, said Kisho Kurokawa: an uncertainty about existence, a lack of faith in the visible, a suspicion of the eternal. Interesting statement. I like the first part, an uncertainty about existence. Then I like a lack of faith in the visible. But strangely, exactly when he says that he's suspicious of the eternal, somehow, I think it was Lucian Blaga who said that, not him or not just him, but I imagine other people think that you can achieve the eternal, or you can, yeah, in a way, arrive at the eternal through the ephemeral. So, you know, yeah, it's a paradox, but if you assume the ephemeral, you might arrive at the eternal through the honesty of assuming what appears to be vulnerable and fragile and transitory and ephemeral. I don't know if I explained well what I try to think, what I try to say. The principles of the metabolist, because Kisho Kurokawa was a metabolist architect, revolved around ideas of impermanence and change. And as the name suggests, the movement was intended to have more in common with natural processes. Each one a hero, the philosophy of symbiosis. Well, wishful thinking, but it's nice to think in this way. Yes, each one a hero. He struggled to get commissions early in his career and was so poor that he made his models from noodles, photographed them after they were dry, then cooked and ate them. Beautiful. Can you imagine one of the most celebrated architects in the world, not just in Japan? He was so poor that he made his models from noodles, photographed them, and after they were dry, and then cooked them and ate them. Eatable models, nice. Kurokawa, who was fluent in English, was an articulate advocate and a prolific writer of deeply philosophical books that discuss the age of life rather than the age of the machine. This is also good to remember. For him, or that's what he claimed, I'm not so sure that he truly achieved that, but if indeed he was concerned with the age of life and not with the age of the machine, he probably would not have subscribed to the conception of Le Corbusier that the house is a machine habitée, is a machine for living. Here he is. Here he was as a young man after he ate the noodles, I expect. He didn't have money for more than those noodles he made the models for, because he spent them on the tie. And this was his beautiful wife, an actress, a Japanese actress, apparently famous, Ayako Wakao. And you can read about her on Wikipedia. Was a Japanese, maybe she's still alive, born in 1933, a Japanese actress, began her career anyway. Here she is. Well, you know, Kurokawa had a good taste, so to speak. And here he is working with his model in his office. So he founded the metabolist movement in 1960. He was actually the founder. I don't know if he was alone. The key principle being symbiosis, synthesis, symbiosis, moving away from the centralized prototype of the European city, centralized squares, for example. It was a radical vision of cities without centers, a web of decentralized cells or modules. Metabolism proposed building spaces and structures in relation to metabolistic structures, which constantly undergo the process of growth, change, circulation, and recycling. It was a symbiosis of culture, design, and nature, a biological, relative, and variable model versus modernism, a mechanical, industrial model. Well, these are the words, but the truth is, he never, in my opinion, truly moved away from the mechanical and the industrial model. And we'll see why. But the attempt was correct towards symbiosis and to go even beyond modernism. Did he achieve that? I'm not sure. Japan's new National Art Center. This is, you know, he is near pictures of this building, later building in his career. I like the way he is dressed. I mean, you know, traditionally. But in what measure the building itself is connecting with that tradition of the clothing that he assumed here, I'm not sure. But he was an interesting man, and he looks good dressed as a, I don't know, is that the dressing of a samurai? Probably not, just some kind of a Japanese traditional attire. And this is the building. Well, I don't see too much tradition here, not because it is modern, but because it is, you know, reduced to just a few materials, and there is, well, there is no wood. There is a little bit of ornamental wood inside, but otherwise the building is concrete and steel and glass. Maybe not a bad building, but a little bit, in my opinion, predictable, almost unspectacular, which for an art museum, but then why not? We have too many spectacular buildings. So again, this is a later building built by Kisho Kurokawa. Even if he used glass, he treated it differently, but it's still glass. All right. You know, are these functioning as some kind of brise-soleil? Maybe diffusing a little bit the light. Maybe it's possible. I hope they are not just ornamentally placed there. I should have had a presentation on him, chronological, but it's not. Here is the man. Intense man. Very willful, in my opinion. and kind of in opposition to what he claimed about, the fragility, the ephemerality. I have a feeling actually, and it's true, I think it's true what Luigi Prestinenza said, that architects say one thing and do another. A big forehead otherwise, and well, at this time when the picture was taken, I'm sure he didn't need his models any longer. This is the capsule tower that he built in Tokyo, and an interesting tower which was, I think, was in danger of being demolished recently, but it was saved. And you see, Japan, high tech, Kisho Kurokawa, but the bed and the pillow and everything that is there, could have been in any other country and in any other kind of room, actually. And I hope I have here pictures with more pictures with interiors of this otherwise striking tower, the capsule tower in Tokyo, done with prefabricated units incorporated into the structure of the building. So yes, when it was built, and still looks kind of futuristic, so to speak, but we'll see inside life manifesting itself very differently from how the architecture proclaims. Here is the samurai himself again. And from the samurai, the elegance, the eternal look of the samurai almost, we arrive at something very different. The life inside one of the capsules, if not several capsules. Look at this. This is inside the capsule, and look at the inhabitant. Who said that disorder only belongs to certain countries? No, it belongs to Japan as well. That man is probably happy in that very, very small space, although they can live in even smaller spaces than this. And he looks wise, kind of like unknown philosopher or something. I like his eyebrows. The building still stands out as a unique building where he applied the principles of metabolism, but in my opinion, still somehow mechanically. Although he wanted to achieve symbiosis, and look at the plan of one cell. I mean, this is the plan, an idealized version of what a container of life might be. But now we arrive at pictures of life within this, and you'll see that. Each inhabitant, used a certain form, too much space to had a lot of freedom they didn't have. This is one version of a possible interior, usage. This is a little bit more, James Bond. Then one even brought the bananas and the bicycle in. Of course, the bananas are not so difficult to be accommodated even in the smaller space, but the bicycle, well, the man brought his bicycle there. And it's rather nice. Actually, we don't need a lot of space to be happy. Maybe as Swedenborg said, the more angels in the sky, the more space, quoted by Daniel Lipskin. Look at this. It's, it's life, life with disorder, with doubts, with questions, with troubles, with lack of money, everything that belongs to life. Look here, this Japanese man places his towels just like I do, and I have a space a little bit bigger than what he has here. It's fine. I mean, these people are, are they students? We saw also an old man, an older man, and it's okay. But you see, architecture magazines usually don't show you something like this. They only show, when we think of Japanese design, we don't imagine something like this. We only see katsura and beautiful tatami rooms, where the disorder of life is not seen. Hello. Oh, is he Japanese? Maybe yes, maybe not. I'm not sure. Anyway. During construction, the Capsule Tower, the Capsule Tower. Now, the Helix City, a futuristic project, an urban project by Kisho Kurokawa. And I wonder how many architects in our country think of visionary cities. Of course not. No, we think that architecture is just to do little houses for certain clients, and that's it. And we even call them visionary architecture. Well, this is visionary architecture. You might like it or you might not like it, but it's visionary. Anyway, the Resort Center in Hawaii, this is an interesting work from 1967, and it was built. And I like this plan. It almost looks like, I don't know, a Native American Indian sand drawing or something. It's mysterious. Well, the building itself maybe is not so mysterious. It's built with concrete. Architecture is a theater stage setting where the leading actors are the people. And to dramatically direct the dialogue between these people and space is the technique of designing, I guess. Kisho Kurokawa. He intended to build several of these, but he only built one. But still, it's rather interesting. And I see no incompatibility between, people jumping into the water. In other words, playfulness and brutalist architecture, if we are to call it brutalist. The forms, the shapes are not brutalist, but maybe, this is what he intended to do, to have several units like this built one after the other, but I think only one. I like the plan. I even like this drawing, in sepia. So we go to reading a little bit about this. A resort center in an island city was a miniature mega structure. What strange words, miniature mega structure. Isn't it strange, the language? How could a mega structure be minimal or miniature? Anyway, the design concept evolved from the architect's theoretical project Metamorphosis, which envisioned an organic city consisting of a number of interlocking loops, each forming a self-contained urban quarter. Grow simply by adding, sorry, I can't read because it's this thing here. When the city expanded, it would grow simply by adding more loops, mimicking the duplication of cells. As a result, the city would stretch out in a natural linear pattern, distinct from both the radial form of most existing cities and the rigid linear configuration of the earlier megaforms like Tange's Tokyo Bay project. These Japanese were formidable. I admire them. They are so restless in their creativity. We need something like this again in the world, I think. Idealists, but they're also pragmatists. They also built a lot. So, moving forward. Metamorphosis confirmed Kurokawa's commitment to the architecture of life. The loop was first employed in a master plan for Hishinon New Town in Aichi, which was organized into 3 loop-shaped residential districts with civic and commercial facilities located along their interfaces. Design concept description by Kisho Kurokawa architects. This building is based on a metabolic architecture of cells. It is also a ring architecture, loop architecture of circulation. Architecture of no center is another manifesto of the age of life. Now, in my opinion, he's a little bit rhetorical here, because I don't think his architecture is so no center as he claims. But theoretically, I think he's right. In what measure he achieved what he said, I don't know. It remains to be seen. Agricultural city from 1960. This is also something that we should think about. In the context of the climate change and all kinds of crises we are confronted with, I think the idea of an agricultural city might be very welcomed. And here it is. So Japanese architecture, architect Kisho Kurokawa designed in the 60s the agricultural city, intended for the replacement of the agricultural towns in Aichi destroyed by the Ise Bay typhoon in 1959. The accommodation was to be raised above the ground to deal with future flooding. The grid was intended to be between 300 and 500 meters. Kurokawa challenged the assumption that the city and the country need be in antagonism. I like this. I really think assuming the rural and the urban simultaneously and somehow bringing them together could be very beneficial. I even thought of the so-called concept of supra-rural, kind of a symmetrically situated vis-a-vis the suburban. So we have suburbs. Why shouldn't we have a supra-rural, meaning some kind of an extension of the rural towards the city, not necessarily physically, but conceptually or metaphorically, a growth of the village towards what the urban or the urbe means, without becoming actually a city or urban. Okay. So this is still based on the grid. It's still based on the mechanism of reason, I would say, a little bit excessively. I like more the organic planning of the previous project that we saw in Hawaii. Anyway, this is still with squares and grid and all the rest. But maybe in this way, he tried to bring closer the country, as he put it, or the rural and the city. But I admire this attempt of an architect to work in urbanism as well. And I think good architects do that. They are not just, building buildings. They are also working on the macro scale. And, the urbanism is an art. It could be an art, should be an art that would benefit from the talent of the architect. Unfortunately, in our case, in our country, they are divorced. Most of the time, the urbanist is one specialist and the architect is another specialist, and the architect doesn't do urbanism and the urbanist doesn't do architecture. This is not the case. This was not the case with the Japanese metabolists. They all built buildings, but they also created utopian visions of urbanism, if we are to call it so. Although in the case of Japan, the influence of tradition, the anchoring in tradition was very strong. And you see even in this house here. I think we need again, but it's true, we live at a different time. How can we bring to architecture, to urbanism, that freshness of vision, that radicalism of the Japanese after the Second World War? It's probably not easily possible, but we better do it, better sooner than later. Here he is. I like him in this picture. He looks like a man who struggled through and arrived at a certain kind of wisdom, probably, hopefully. Maybe that period in his life when he was eating his own models made of noodles helped him towards this, I call it wisdom. Now, the Toshiba Pavilion at the Osaka Expo, 1970, in my opinion, there was always something mechanical, although he protested against the mechanical, but you see it even here. Yes, he aspired towards some kind of organicity, but still this organicity is achieved from modules. It's still a modular architecture. And this is mechanical. And, so I don't think he got too far towards that age of life that he, mentioned as a goal. But he wanted growth, he wanted transformation, he wanted metamorphosis, he wanted metabolism. And the problem with metabolism is that the word itself ends with the three letters, ISM. And in my opinion, truly lived life does not become a system. That is, it doesn't become an ism. It's a problem with an ism. If life becomes an ism that is a system, then I'm not so sure it's so alive any longer. But, this was his proposal for Osaka, and it was built, and maybe, our conception in Europe of what is nature, what is, man-made, is different. There is a level of artificiality here. And yes, it was about technology. That was a very well-known theme of this particular world exhibition in Osaka in 1970. And you see here a relationship somehow, well, a posteriori discovered between his building and, all kinds of fantasies coming from the media and from, the filmic so-called industry. I like this building, which is inspired by tradition, by the culture of Japan. It's modern, but also you cannot deny the relationship with the local culture. The inside as well. This is a building in southwest Wales, a cancer caring center in Swansea. He assumed also the spiral, as you can see here. It has something of a, how do you call it? I forgot now the English word. Anyway, does it have a lot of grace, this building? I'm not sure, but then, it's a building destined for, dealing with cancer. So maybe thinking of grace would be a little bit problematic. Or maybe not. Maybe it would be exactly what would have been needed, grace. The Nagoya City Art Museum from 1983, 1987. Those were the years when postmodernism was ravishing architecture. And he was not immune to it either, as you can see here. Not maybe fatally, but he was affected by it. It affected many, many people. And the Japanese, they have the power to resist, but postmodernism was difficult to resist, unfortunately, for many of them. You just wouldn't believe your eyes if you saw a building built by Kengo Kuma, of all people, around that time. It's just incredible. Anyway, Kisho Kurokawa, a building built in the 80s. Back to the Osaka building, which we already saw. And now the Van Gogh Museum exposition, the exposition wing in Amsterdam. This one I visited. He built this glass part later. I mean, based on his drawings from Japan, the Dutch built this thing. Initially, he only built this part of the building for the great, truly great painter. What an honor to build a building for Vincent van Gogh. So that's how he built it initially. And then later on, they added this part. And he was more like, it was based on his sketch, maybe a little more than a sketch. But yeah, I don't know. I visited it, but I'm not sure it truly connected here with Vincent van Gogh. It is a container, this building, a container of art. But I guess, sure. Here, a sculpture by probably Richard Serra, the North American sculptor, an interesting sculptor. Glass, glass, and glass again. Everything is of glass, even the steps of the stair, which to me is a little bit problematic. I'm sure it's very strong, this glass, but I don't know. I would feel strange to walk on a stair where the steps are made of glass. I guess it was proposed, or maybe this building also belongs to the Van Gogh building, and there is a connection underground. It's possible. I don't remember visiting this part. The National Ethnology Museum. This is an interesting work by him from 1977, so an early work. Here he inspired himself from very similar architectures in old India. It's an ethnological museum, so I guess it's okay. In a way, the most interesting part of this project is exactly the old, the useless. I mean, after all, what is the real function of all of this? It's almost useless. I mean, if you really wanted to arrive at this level, one stair or two at the most would have been enough without this wandering. But exactly this part is the most interesting part of the work, in my opinion. A very large building. This is another work at Osaka, at the Osaka Expo. we saw one, now this is the second one, and you can see the same mechanical additive process. He aspired towards the age of life, as he called it, but I think he was still mechanicist in his, conceiving an architecture, appropriate for the age of life. I see the machine here. I see the mechanics of additive processes. Metabolism in Architecture, a book he published. In Tokyo, Japan, there are too many people and not enough space. So what do architects do? They maximize on that space, creating trendy and affordable micro apartments. This is not a work by him. It's a work by Arakawa, but an interesting work by an artist who became an architect. And look at this, was done, this, I don't know if it was done by an architect, but look at the space. It has the width of a bed, a twin size bed. Yeah, you can live minimally, and who knows, they can do it. And look at this. Now, this was not done by Kurokawa. I just show some examples of minimal spaces in Japan, or this one. Of course, the rent will not be very high here. That's the whole idea. You can live in a 1 meter wide room, if we can call it room. This reminds me a little bit of my chambre de bonne in Paris. The Museum of Modern Art in Saitama, I don't know. I think his theoretical ideas were positive and valid. To what extent he achieved what he proclaimed in his theoretical writings in his own architecture, I am not so sure about that. Function as a criterion in architecture achieved many things, but it also resulted in the articulation and concretization of space. In the process of providing rationally and clearly articulated spaces, the virtues of nebulous and undifferentiated space that naturally exists between demarcated areas was totally neglected. Spaces which might embrace two or more meanings were eliminated in functional architecture. I totally agree with him. Functional architecture is very, very simplistic. Indeed, it eliminated those in-between spaces, the interstitial spaces, the virtues of what he calls the nebulous and undifferentiated space. I think it is imperative that we bring back those so-called nebulous and undifferentiated spaces, because functionalism is a disaster. It tries to explain everything and govern everything through reason and function, and life is not like this. There are many times when we are silent, when we do not function, so to speak, when those, just like in music and just like in writing, you have the space in between the lines, you have the moments of silence. So in a lived life, you also have, spaces and moments, so space and time of what he calls, again, nebulous and undifferentiated space. Where is that nebulous and undifferentiated space in functionalist architecture? It does not exist. He's right. Spaces which might embrace two or more meanings were eliminated because the functional architecture writes on each room the specified function. This is a bedroom, this is a living room, this is a kitchen, and there is no ambiguity. There are no two or more meanings, there is just one. And this is not holistic thinking at all. It's not symbiosis. Intercultural architecture, the philosophy of symbiosis. The philosophy of symbiosis, again, Kisho Kurokawa. Kuala Lumpur International Airport in Malaysia, yeah, built by Kisho Kurokawa. These architects achieve fame not only through the buildings they build, but also through the writings they wrote. It's important for an architect to manifest himself in both ways, although there are architects who just build, you know, and there are very good architects. Of course, Palladio also wrote. He published his 4 books on architecture, but Alvar Aalto didn't really. It depends. Frank Lloyd Wright wrote a lot. Le Corbusier wrote a lot. Le Corbusier published about 18 books, and it's a medium through which you advance and advocate your ideas. But not everybody, you know, manifested himself or herself through writings. But I do think writings or the theoretical aspects of architecture are also important, especially when you try to, when between the built work and the theoretical work, there is an organic relationship and they don't betray each other, which is also possible. Okay, the airport by Kisho Kurokawa. In my opinion, these architects like him, and not just him, you know, they are inviolable. I mean, they have very rich lives. They are creative. They manifest their creativity. They publish books. They build buildings. And it's all because of courage, really. You know, they are not timid. They promote new ideas. Sometimes maybe, you know, they are not always very profound, but the idea is to move forward in architecture if you are an architect, and be courageous, propose even dreamy things, you know, like him. Look at his smile, look at his drawing behind, look at his attire, you know. It's a man who smiles. He smiles because he achieved something in his life. And, you know, in certain parts of the world, I think we need examples like his. We cannot dress as samurais all over the world, of course, but we all have the traditions of our own countries. And I think it's possible, if we explore in depth those traditions, we could generate, you know, an architecture which is both local and global. The Capsule House, K, this one is similar kind of to the Capsule Tower. It's just that it's a private house. It's kind of mechanical and artificial, in my opinion, and rather cold, but he applied his principles, the metabolism principles. I would say rather mechanically and artificially, but he did it. Anyway, it was built, the Capsule House, and not the Capsule Tower. The Museum of Modern Art in Wakayama. Headquarters of the Japanese Red Cross Society, 1975-1977. Osaka City, Osaka. Let's see what he says about well, I don't know if he says this. Walter Gropius in the Bauhaus Manifesto from 1919. Together we will want, think up, and create the new building of the future, which will be everything in one shape. Architecture, sculpture, and painting, which from millions of hands of craftsmen will rise once towards the heavens as a crystal symbol of a new coming phase. This is another building by Kurokawa. I'm not sure if it's truly serving the new phase from 1 million hands, but a bold building added to the skyline of Tokyo. And the Ehime Museum of Science in Japan, 1991-1994. These Japanese architects are bold, you know, they propose, you know, something crazy things, and they get built, and they build them properly. As you know, the Japanese can build anything perfectly. How do they do it? Well, they do it with hard work. That's how they do it. And skill, of course, and seriousness. Melbourne Central. Here he is with his conical pyramids in Australia, Kisho Kurokawa. And those are wall climbers inside the conical pyramid. And now I end the presentation with this folding chair designed by him. He designed also some furniture. This is a folding chair, and it's kind of interesting. It's more than a chair. It's almost a you know, a modern throne, maybe a little bit inspired by the creations of Charles Mackintosh and Mackintosh. Would you call this a folding chair? Not really, but anyway. Now the Fractal Chair, another chair done by, imagined and built by Kisho Kurokawa. Is it really fractal? I'm not sure. But is it comfortable? I'm not very sure of that either. But anyway, it was built. It's closer to sculpture in a way, but it's a sculptural furniture. Let's put it this way. The Fractal Chair by Kisho Kurokawa. And here he is. I think this is the last picture of this presentation. Hello, Mr. Kurokawa. Happy birthday to you. That's it for today.